Hello and welcome to the Tim Robinson podcast. With me, your host, Tim Robinson. My background is in coaching males to build bodies that they can be happy with, and this podcast mirrors my never-ending quest to optimize human happiness, health, and performance. Each week, we'll get a chance to speak to other experts in the field of health to consolidate our ideas and create a show full of insights to help you go to the next level. Today's podcast, I'm talking to Coach Ozzie. And Coach Ozzie, like myself, he works with clients to help them improve their bodies, improve their health, improve their fitness. And we basically had a fascinating chat going into how we get results with the people that we work with, but more importantly, how we get results in this current time right now, where normally the streets would be busy, but as you can see, there's hardly anyone on the roads because of what we're going through right now as a country. And how do we actually continue to get results with the people that we work with and with ourselves as well in this current time with gyms being shut? So we took a real deep dive into that, discussing both the physical components, but also up here and how we get motivated to train. So it's a fascinating chat. Coming away from the chat, actually, it was really helpful for me as well to get some new insights. So really hope you enjoy it. Enjoy the show and let me know what you think. All right, so welcome to the podcast, Ozzie.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. Welcome, my bro. All right, so I'll give you a little intro, and then you can tell me if I've historically remembered everything correctly from when we used to work together.
Cool.
Okay, so guys, if you just tuned in, I used to work with Ozzie back at Number One Fitness back in the day, and so yeah, what kind of got me chatting to you? I was training for a competition at the time. WBFF, which was like a kind of fitness model type thing where you diet down, take clothes off, get on stage. And I was deep in a very, very long dieting process, and I was super into the technical side of training at that point in my life. I mean, I'd already started to see the benefits of like block periodization, so basically taking planned rest times, deloading every 5 weeks or deloading every 4 weeks. And anyway, as I was like digging more and more and more into the knowledge of like training and programming and all that stuff, and I was becoming obsessed with it, I discovered someone called Louis Simmons. And I got really into the idea of conjugate periodization, which we'll cover in a second. And that was where that was where I found you really very interesting to talk to, because your style of training was kind of very interested in, you were basically, you love the conjugate method and you come from a powerlifting background, and I was basically keen to kind of learn some stuff from you because you obviously seem to know what you're talking about in that area. And anyway, so that's like how my impression of you when I met you. And then of course you've actually got a background in powerlifting and martial arts as well, right?
Yeah, that's the one. You got it all there.
Yeah. I've described you as a human being from start to finish.
Exactly. That all encompassing. But yeah, you're pretty much spot on. So I've been a strength conditioning coach and personal trainer for like 10 years. I'm now like the founder of Functional RX, which is a remote coaching company. And yeah, you're right. Background is predominantly actually in martial arts. I started martial arts, black belt in Taekwondo, professionally competed in Muay Thai, and then moved over to powerlifting, competitive powerlifting, which was fun, which was cool, and very different from the martial arts side of things. And yeah, to sum up, I basically subscribe to the conjugate way of doing things, especially when it comes to training and periodizing training for that matter. So yeah, that's me, Coach Oz. Yeah.
Coach Oz. So Coach Oz, you're quite a technical guy, and you know you love the technical. But for somebody that is completely doesn't know much about training, how would you summarize what conjugate training is?
Yeah, good question. I mean, essentially, conjugate is, then the meaning is coupling, and the conjugate system, conjugate method, just means the coupling of different methods or systems, and essentially means being used all at once. So instead of, let's say, your traditional block periodization, where you would have typically, you would have a set period of time where you train for train in a set specific way. Let's say you would have a muscle building phase, then a fat loss phase, then an endurance phase, and then you roll back around to a muscle gain phase. The conjugate method or conjugate system, the idea kind of behind it is to couple all of those things at once to attain a high level of performance, or set goal, usually performance-based goal. But what I've kind of found is by the coupling of those methods, it actually works for the everyday man, to be honest.
Right. Okay. God, all women. Yeah. Because you train both men and women.
Yeah, exactly. So it works for both. So like I said, the conjugate system is a coupling of different methods trained together at once. Historically, you came across it via Louis Simmons. Yeah, he is kind of the godfather of powerlifting and the godfather of the conjugate method. But what we found over time is where you're taking the conjugate system, which was popularized by the West Side method in powerlifting, it's been filtered in such a way that it's been able to be translated into things like CrossFit and the functional fitness arena. And almost today, we call the conjugate system like mixed modal training, which we see in the arena of functional fitness right now, the training of different types of methods all at once. And you see it in the sport of CrossFit, right?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, all right. So I'll describe it, and you tell me if I've got a good description.
Yeah.
So basically, you got different energy systems. So you can do basically you've got like strength, maximal power. Then you've got what the average person would think of as like high reps, muscle building training.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got aerobic training.
Yep.
And what conjugate basically does is it mixes them all up, so you do them all at once. Not within the same workout, but within your training program, you'll do absolute power training, you'll do high rep muscle building training, and then you'll do cardiovascular training.
Yeah, all within either a set period of time, a cycle of training, or yes, sometimes the conjugate system can be seen in one training session. Today, actually, we call it pieces of work. Some people will do a main piece, which is a strength piece. They might, and then they do, let's say they have an optional engine workout, which again is a different energy system and is training different methods all in one workout, essentially. So, which again, like for example, the engine stuff, you would class as GPP in the conjugate. And, the strength piece would essentially be kind of either max effort or depending on what you were doing, it might be repetition method. But just to kind of like jump onto that, the conjugate system kind of is broken down into force development. So force being mass times acceleration equals force. So there's two sides of that equation that needs to be developed. Then we're talking about a couple of other things. We're talking about building weaknesses, building weak points, where we do it in the form of bodybuilding, repetition method, functional bodybuilding, if you want to call it that. And then the overarching theme in kind of the conjugate system is having a good level of GPP. So GPP being general physical preparedness. So the body's ability to be relatively fit at any one time in order to handle the demands of a training program or actual general stress, either day to day, week to week, or the all-encompassing stress that people face every day. In a sporting sense, that's a little bit different. So the GPP level is going to be kind of like your baseline fitness in order to peak for the next kind of like cycle of training. But essentially, going back to the beginning, you have, again, yes, you have max effort, which is kind of one end of the force spectrum, the mass side, moving mass, straining, developing your nervous system. You have the acceleration, the dynamic effort stuff. So yeah, both developing high rates of force, which actually, creates muscle tension in the muscles, makes them stronger, makes them more durable. And then you have building weaknesses, which we call the repetition method, aka bodybuilding, aka functional bodybuilding. Exactly. And then the last thing is your general level of GPP, or for people that may compete recreationally in sport, it might be SPP, which is kind of like skill-based performance. But yeah, so you're developing that general physical preparedness, that general fitness in order to cope with the demands of a training program.
Yeah. So I think that's a very important point to mention. A lot of people want to jump into, no matter whether it's block periodization or conjugate method, a lot of people want to jump into fancy training programs, but what they don't necessarily realize is you actually have to be fit to train.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to some degree, we all need like a base level of fitness before we embark on, you know, and in today's world, everything's so hard, so fast, so hardcore, you know, go, 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 you know, you have to generally always be like the fittest and the strongest. But for the average person, you know, creating just a basic baseline just to start from, to get fitter, to get stronger, to feel like you have more energy, to perform a little better. That's probably where it all starts. And like, you know, like I said, it starts with GPP, your general work, your general physical work. And yeah, like today's world, people just want to move hard and want to move fast. But the problem is, you know, aggressive action, aggressive reaction, right? So if the body's not primed to do those kinds of tasks, then you're always going to fall short of sort of that longevity aspect, you know, that sustainable result, the golden sort of holy grail people sort of seek. But yeah.
I guess if I could interject there, if you look at what the human body is, the human body is a system of systems, but more than that, not just like, if you look historically at Homo sapiens when they evolved, we didn't rise to the top of the food chain because we're the fastest or because we could swim the best, but it's because we could do everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, in a sense, the conjugate method is replicating what an actual human being should do in nature. Because a human being should do high rep work, he should do powerful, explosive work, he should have a good base, and then he should do some, what you would call high repetition bodybuilding. He should do some, like mid-range rep work as well, if that makes sense. So I guess the conjugate is, in a sense, a replication of that. Just that thought just came to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, like I said, I mean, to be honest, if you're talking about this sort of for the everyday person, if it was like if we're talking about the kind of user, for the everyday person, they probably do need to be developing kind of these different systems. And like I said, it all starts with that base level, that general physical preparedness. So let's take some examples of this, because a lot of people just throw around terminology, and it's like, well, actually, what is the application of this? And so, for example, your general GPP work for like the everyday person would be something like your step count. And everybody talks about step count these days, right? You know, can you walk? Are you able to walk 10,000 steps a day? Are you able to walk 5,000 steps a day? You know, are you even able to walk in, you know, just down the street? Building up sort of like that sort of general level first. Or it might be being able to climb a certain amount of stairs every day. You know, it might be that, I mean, with that, I'm talking about like real base level.
Yeah.
That might be the starting point, right? So let's just say, like, at bare bones, that would be the starting point. So then you would break down those other little areas on the conjugate system, go, okay, how do these areas now apply to like the everyday person? And so you go, okay, cool. So like max effort. So I need to strain. I need to kind of move my body and feel kind of some kind of strain against it, some kind of stress against it. So again, you apply the principle. So the principle might just be to lift something heavy, aka max effort. So, and heavy being relative for the person, that's something that is safe, something that is doable for that person, something that if they were to kind of explain how that felt, it'd be like, okay, that's quite a bit of effort. And so that would be kind of your first principle, is then to move some weight, move some stuff around. Then you're talking about dynamic effort. Now, traditionally, if you're kind of that intermediate type level, then we'd start talking about kind of more explosive work. But we know explosive work, you know, plyometric based work, it's advanced, it's intermediate to advanced. So if we're taking it from like a base level, you'd just be looking at moving a little faster. You might be looking at not even, you might not even be looking at doing like high explosive work. It might just be having proficient techniques and having repeated bouts. And it could be something simple. Like, let's say, for example, you know, day one, I might do a squat, right? I might do that with, let's say, a rucksack on my back. But let's say that's the heavy day. Well, let's say day two, we want to just dial in the technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into very small segments. I'm going to take the rucksack off, and I'm just going to practice an air squat, and I'm just going to do repeated bouts. Let's say, you know, X amount of reps, repeated bouts, and they all have to look the same. They all have to move at the same pace, and they have to be pinpoint perfect. And that's like your second day. So now you go down to, okay, then you get your weak point training, aka bodybuilding. So let's say, for example, okay, we break down that air squat, and all of a sudden we start seeing issues. You know, we might see an ankle mobility issue. We might just see, okay, we just can't get down far enough. So all of a sudden we might start implementing, I don't know, a squat to box, a box squat, something where we have a point of reference. We can train to maybe get a little lower in the squat, and we can do that repeated times and just build up some musculature to help aid the rest of the days. And then all the while we're doing this, we have our step count, our 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 steps a day, which essentially covers the GPP work. Now that's kind of like, I would say something that's like most fundamental level. But what I'm trying to say here is that if we can take that principle-based approach to training, all of a sudden, you know, our training becomes a little bit more fun, a little bit more varied. There's a lot more we can do with it. So if we were to take that against, let's say, block periodization, where we would have, you know, very set periods of time focusing on one set thing, well, it's great. And for a beginner, actually would work. Anything would probably work for a beginner. But for the most part, people have had some experience and some history of exercise, and they need to keep it fun and varied. So I believe conjugate kind of like surpasses that kind of block periodization. Reason being, it has more variety. It's a little bit more fun. And also, you don't lose any one thing at one time. For example, if we take that user base, you know, let's say I'm at an intermediate level. If I start training in a block of time for just strength, and then I neglect the other areas, then let's say I do a fat loss phase, then let's say I do an endurance phase, then let's say I do a muscle gain phase, and then move back to a strength phase. What do you think is going to happen to my overall absolute strength or even relative strength? Well, it's probably decreased. Whereas on the conjugate system, that's being implemented at some point within the whole cycle the whole time. And so I just find it interesting for user experience, from very fundamental base level, where you're taking a principle-based approach to the conjugate system or conjugate method, all the way up to, let's say, intermediate to advanced levels, where maybe you might be recreationally competing in some kind of sport, or you're just a fitness enthusiast. I think this is where a system can be applied. And yeah, so that's why I tend to tilt towards a conjugate style of training, or at least a principle-based approach in that sense.
Yeah, you need principles, that's for sure. Otherwise, what we do.
Yeah, you do.
I tend towards principles as well. That's good to hear. Yeah. Okay. What about someone like, a lot of my clients are very like cosmetic goals. Okay. They want to look better. I'm sure the same with you. So for guys that are purely interested in muscle building, it's interesting what you say, because like, I think in one of our previous chats, there are a lot of aspects of conjugate training that are actually are in block periodization. At least a good coach should be coaching those. For example, like you say, step count and those kind of things. So you are working on different energy systems. But let's say you were training a bodybuilder, like genuinely. Would you favor block periodization, or what are your thoughts on that? Or
personally, I mean, look, the disclaimer here is I don't train a lot of bodybuilding.
Yeah. Right, so like, disclaimer is I am a powerlifter and I love conjugate training. But I mean,
first and foremost. But I mean, for me, a couple of good examples. When you look at the people that do it well, is have you ever heard of John Meadows? You know, the whole mountain dog training and stuff. So he works closely with. Sorry.
You might be doing a little bit of you know.
Yeah. I mean, regardless.
One disclaimer for our listeners.
Yeah, disclaimer too. But regardless, I mean, he works closely with Dave Tate of Elite FTS, who's a massive. I mean, he's straight out of Westside, massive advocate for conjugate. And if you break down some of like essentially his programs, there is that principle-based approach, that conjugate style to training where, for example, they just call it high-low days or heavy light days. But there is that system within a training block, within a training, you know, cycle where they're not just focusing on one specific method. They might move a little bit of heavy weight on one day. They might train it a little bit lighter the next. Yeah, with bodybuilding, volume is always going to be king. So overall volume kind of moved, and you know, all the good stuff. But essentially, I would probably still take that. And again, it comes down to the user. What level are they at? What are their goals? And essentially, what do they really want to get out from their training? Because if they're, for example, if you take, not that I ever would, but if you were to take a bodybuilder, you probably could have a conjugate style of training or more varied amount of training further away from any kind of photo shoot, any kind of contest of any kind. Let's just say the person actually competes. Whereas if it's just recreational and it's fun, what they would probably find themselves doing is being a lot more varied in their training, far out, and then points in time during the training year where they want to quote unquote peak for some reason or another.
Yeah.
That's probably when things will probably be a little bit more focused. A lot of like the general stuff gets taken out, and you kind of focus and dial in on what specifically is needed for that moment. But that's just a different conversation from overall training to actually like peaking, right? So let's say even sports, powerlifting, you know, functional fitness, anything. Further out from a competition, there's going to be more variety in training. There's going to be more variety of stimulus, right? And maybe different training methods and working on weak points. Now, the closer you're getting to a competition or a point in time where you would like to peak, so it doesn't have to be competition, you're going to take out some of that fluff. And maybe it's not fluff, but you're going to take out a lot of that stuff that's not needed, and you're going to focus solely on the thing that's going to get you to that point. Now, for the vast majority of people that probably just don't compete or just do this for fun, there might be a reason to peak at some time or another, but generally, if you could just stay the fittest, the strongest, with the best base level of fitness possible all year round, why would you not? So, I mean, to that point, you know, rolling right around to the whole bodybuilder thing, I think for me, if it was, I'd probably take, like, again, a more varied approach further out from whenever that person would like to peak or to express a show of results, whether in competition or a photo shoot or just a moment in time. And then the closer we got to it, obviously the things that were most needed to get that win, i.e. the result, I would probably focus more on that. How about you? What would you do? You're the guy.
Yeah. Ask me the question.
How would you train
I was listening to you then. Go on.
No, so how about you? Where would you go with it?
Training a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, you know what, the fact of the matter is they've always got other things in their life as well, right? So they might have a kid, or they might have a job. So for me personally, block periodization is it's a simple model to use because they can fill out their program, they can focus on what they need to focus on, and it's not complicated. So it's something that I'm familiar with as well. And the other thing as well, when you're talking about getting them ready for a competition, give them a way to track their cardio. What would you call cardio in your sphere? In your
Call it cardio.
yeah,
No,
the high rep,
I mean,
work. Yeah.
Your GPP work. I mean, call it cardio, call it whatever you want, really, right? Your aerobic work, yeah.
But actually, I use the conjugate style. I used the conjugate style for a while with one of my clients. I don't know if you remember this one woman I used to train. It was absolutely shredded. She used to do.
Oh yeah, I do.
Remember her? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I used the conjugate style with her because I was fascinated by it for a while. And although, like you say, it was a really, really fun way of training, when it came down to actually dieting her down for a photo shoot, yeah, we went back to the block periodization style of training because, like you say, it's the easiest way to prime for the actual goal of muscle building. You know what I mean? And then there's a reason why people train bodybuilding, because it's useful for bodybuilding. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No,
And that's like that's the most like, people train bodybuilding because it's good for bodybuilding, but that's actually, it's kind of true. Whereas conjugate is a great way to be good at all aspects of fitness, but at the same time, when your clients want to get results in one particular area, which for me typically tends to be building muscle or losing body fat whilst building or retaining muscle tissue, yeah, I go block periodization
yeah, for sure. I mean,
right
I,
now.
I mean, the overarching theme, I mean, to be honest, and I had this discussion the other day, is, to be frank, the overarching theme, regardless of whatever system you choose to do, whatever principles you may have towards health, fitness, training, performance, is consistency and belief in what you actually do. I mean, I believe like you could probably take the worst program, but if you took the worst program but applied some serious consistency and some hard work, you'd get more results than the person on the best program doing it half-assed. Like, let's be frank. So the overarching theme of like anything, and I guess it's like a key discussion to either have like with yourself, with a client, is just like where they feel they could be most consistent. And I have my biases, right? I have a bias,
Yeah.
and sometimes you
Me too.
yeah. I mean, listen, I have a big. I've got to say this actually. The reason I have a bias, and I feel like this happens a lot in the fitness industry, is that it's okay to have a bias. It's okay to stick your stake in the ground and go, this is what I believe in. This is what I'm about. Because the problem is, right now in the fitness industry, you have a lot of sort of jack of all trades that jump from kind of one trend to another that kind of just don't know where they're at, don't know what they're kind of trying to teach. And there's no real wisdom behind the message that they're delivering a lot of the time. The reason is because they just don't really know what they stand for, what they want to back. And I believe there's faults and there's flaws in all kind of training styles, all kind of nutrition, like the way we should approach nutrition, which is like a freaking religion these days, and lifestyle. So to that point, we should all have some kind of bias, and it's okay to be a little bit biased and stick your stake in the ground. Like for me, I've been a massive advocate for conjugate for so long because it's a set of principles I can get behind that are relatable to me. And that's allowed me to be consistent with my training in this kind of style for like, I don't know, this must be close to maybe 9, yeah, probably about 9-10 years. And I have to say, there's the guy that really introduced me to it is his name's Dr. Hassan Zaid. Really cool guy, amazing chiropractor, one of the best chiropractors of all time. And yeah, and I've never gone back since. So to that point, it's like, for me, overarching themes is consistency. Can you get behind the principle of it? Can you do it for a really long time? And for me, you know, with that kind of style, I can get behind it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I like that. That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, I think we need a bit of bias. Absolutely. Because that's where the passion comes from, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's kind of why we're having this conversation right now, because you're passionate, you know, about that conjugate system. But I do think there is a lot you can take from it, even if you are a recreational bodybuilder, because just recognizing the fact that there are different components of fitness. And if you think about it logically, it really does make sense that each one will benefit all the other ones, if you know what I mean.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you just have to take, if somehow, like, the best thing to do sometimes take the extreme examples and take a fraction of it, or look at people that do it best or speak the message best. Like, for example, there's a guy called Stan Efferdin.
Oh yeah.
Now, he was one of the strongest powerlifters. He was a great bodybuilder. And now, even like way into his 50s, he's in phenomenal shape, coaching some of the best sort of like strength athletes in the world, along with bodybuilders and strongmen. And if you look at his sort of basic protocol, he's covering everything. He moves some heavy stuff, he gets some good volume in, and he takes care of his steps. Like, I mean, I'm sure I'm completely murdering that a bit, but like, you could go check him out, or anybody can go check him out. And the message is simple. And again, it comes back to that bias and sticking your stake in the ground, is that if you live behind something and you get behind something, you can be much more consistent for a longer period of time. And really, that's the holy grail for sustainable results. things might fluctuate. You say in bodybuilding, you might look great periods of time, you might look a little off, but overall, if you've got a set of principles you get behind, for the long run, you're always going to be in better shape than the next gal, the next guy.
Yeah, the old version of you.
Yeah. I mean, what about you? What's like? What are your like? What do you put your stake in the ground about? So like, if there's some things that you had to be biased towards in terms of like training, in terms of kind of just like that general training, health, nutrition type thing. Do you have any sort of biases? Do you have any sort of like set principles, stake in the ground sort of ideologies?
Yeah, I think they've changed a lot over the years, because I used to be very, very rigidly kind of powerlifter-esque. For example, always believing you had to bench off your chest and pick a bar off the ground and squat below parallel. But one of the things that I've really, really learned in the last few years, I don't know if I mentioned much to you, in 2017, I managed to injure my lower back, my knees, and both my shoulders at the same time. And
Wow.
yeah, and it was actually, maybe I wasn't being conjugate enough. I probably wasn't doing enough mid-range, 12 to 15 rep work, but I was doing a lot of strength work, and I was adhering to the old powerlifting principles, which, by the way, I know is completely what the rules of a powerlifting competition, which we haven't even discussed, are completely separate from the principles of conjugate periodization, right? Because conjugate periodization, we're talking about different energy systems and incorporating them all into your training. Whereas the rules of powerlifting, one of the things, powerlifting has to be a sport, right? So powerlifting has to be deemed to be fair in a way, so that lifts can be compared to other lifts, so that competitors can be compared to other competitors. So that's the reason why bench has to come off your chest, hips have to go below the knees when you squat, and then the bar has to be lifted off the ground. But one of the true things about training is not everyone is built well to get to those ranges of motion. Yes, we can improve our mobility. We can improve our flexibility, or we can improve our ability to tolerate stress even. But I think one of the most important principles I would say I use with all programs and all clients these days is understanding something called active range of motion. It's the most in fact, that sounds like a fancy term when I describe it to you. It sounds like I'm talking about something technical, but it's basically move through the range of motion you can control. So if I give you a bit more of a fancy explanation, if you, a lot of people make the mistake of exceeding the range that their nervous system permits them to move through. So let's say I'm doing a bench press, and let's say I can get to there, but if I'm lying down, the bar forces me to there. And that extra range of motion, it might not show up as pain today or tomorrow or in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. But eventually, or in my case, a decade. but eventually that can basically show up as stress, as injuries. So I think one of the most important principles I would ask anyone to apply to their training is understanding that active range of motion principle. So whenever you design exercise programs for people, just make sure they're moving within the range of motion that is safe for them and that they have access to. That's not to say that we shouldn't focus on increasing that range of motion over time, potentially, so they can activate more muscle fibers, and that mobility shouldn't be a focus, and But one of the most important principles, I'm sure you're going to agree, exercise should be safe.
Yeah, for sure.
At least as safe as we can make it. If we're training people that train not to compete at high level in athletics, but because they want to improve their quality of life, we've got to keep training safe. And I feel I could have done with a bit more education in my younger days regarding how to make exercise safe. But because I think bodybuilding borrows a lot of its ideals from powerlifting, and there are so many bro things that go around, like squat below parallel, bench off your chest. A lot of people say for example, someone like myself with like long femurs, that for me to get to, there was a period of time where I could get into a neutral position and pick a bar off the ground, and I'm literally at a right angle. Do you know what I mean? Like my
Yeah.
what's the word? My upper back is adjacent to the floor. So if you think about like the amount of stress potentially that could create on the lower back, and I'm not okay. Maybe mobility drills could improve that, but had I just switched at that point to a rack pull, an elevated deadlift, or an RDL, I could have progressed for a lot longer.
Or you could have rotated those for 4 weeks.
Yes, okay.
Because it manages, because again, I mean, I'm going to roll around to conjugate, but again, like one of the main things about conjugate is that it manages fatigue,
Right.
because it changes the stress
True.
and the stimulus. So yeah, I mean, and then it comes back to the other point of active range of motion and developing new active range of motion.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I mean, that can both be done all in the same training cycle, right? So all of a sudden, what are we talking about? Oh, well, we're talking about coupling of two different kind of objectives. Well, guess what? You're doing now conjugate. But yeah, no, you make a really good point with that, and I think there comes the crutch, right? It's the reason we're doing all this is to stay out of pain, move a little better, feel a little better, and we also need to manage the stress and the fatigue that builds up from trying to do all of this. And again, I really nowadays, because I mean I've competed in sports for such a long time, but most of my conversations revolve around, I try to stay away from like sporting conversations unless that person competes. And because I like to bring, the examples around to the everyday person. These should be systems and applications that should really benefit the everyday person, not just because we take so many examples from high level sports. We take so many examples from, people that train, compete at high levels and go, okay, that is the holy grail. That's what we should be doing. Even you have like today, like people love classes, right? On-demand classes, virtual classes right now. And what they forget, they're like, oh my God, that girl's in great shape. They must train all the time. I need to be doing that the same. And the fact of the matter is, it's a poor example because they're in two different places, and they might have various other reasons why they're in shape. And so I believe that when we start having a conversation, and also like as coaches, we should always bring the example back around to the everyday person. It should not be taken straight from, the strongest, the fittest, the best looking, because they are the outliers and they always will be the outliers. To be honest, if they did a shitty program, they would still be outliers. I totally agree with that. And so like again, another overarching theme and another principle I'm kind of stuck behind is my ability to manage fatigue or manage stress. And I believe, creating some kind of system where you could do that. And I was having a discussion the other day with somebody where they were like, hey, I only train classes. Like I love doing classes. I do, I'm not sure if we're even going to talk about like the names of classes, but your typical, Barry's type classes, Peloton, those type ones. They're like, yeah, I do Barry's, I do Peloton, I do yoga. I'm like, cool, that's amazing. And they're like, yeah, but I just do it all in a mismatch but like, I just do it every day. Sometimes do 2 classes a day, but I'm not seeing results. I'm sore, blah, blah, blah. And then what it comes down to essentially is their ability to manage their fatigue. Either they're doing too much, they're doing it in the wrong order, or their recovery, like other factors, nutritionally, lifestyle wise, are just not aligning with what they're trying to do. But in the scope of actually talking about training, I'm like, hey, like, here's what I do. I use this principle-based approach, a conjugate style method. Let's take a look at what kind of stimulus these classes are providing, and let's place them in an order that allows you to recover between the most strenuous ones, the ones that are a little bit more passive, a little bit more active recovery-esque. Let's place those ones as feeders. And now let's put this in some kind of cycle that allows you to see some sort of progression. So this week, how about instead of like 2 of those really hardcore 1,000-calorie dumbbell only classes, why don't we do 1? Next week we'll do 2. And if you're recovering really well and everything else in terms of performance metrics or what you want to see from yourself, how you want to feel, if that's all going well, then we'll stick another 3rd one in. Because ultimately the goal is to again, we can, and I think me and you've spoken about this, you know, we can really find freedom in routine. We can really find progress, you know, in structure. And so they're like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. So it was, again, it taking something that they kind of hold dear and they really enjoy all of it, but just put it in a way that is a benefit to them. And essentially, to be honest, that's kind of what functional RX that's where that all came from. So like the whole remote coaching thing, the business I now have, it's come through those kind of examples, and that way of thinking is that some people are just a little lost of how to put all the pieces together. And it's nice to provide some sort of education with an everyday example than it is to be like, hey, look, this is what the best people do, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, okay. So I'll summarize what you said there a little bit.
Go on.
using the quote. So basically, yeah, using the quote from the other day when we chatted. So structure allows freedom, the ability to express itself. And yeah, and that's what we need, because the average Joe probably knows something about nutrition. He might even understand energy balance, calories in, calories out. He knows protein, or she knows protein is important for building muscle. He knows maybe even getting stronger is important for building muscle, progressive overload. But the thing is, until they've got a system, it's useless, because not useless. You can do all those things. You can throw shit at the wall and some of it will stick. That's the first time I saw on the podcast, by the way. and that's how a lot of people will get results. They'll throw shit at the wall and some of it will stick. But unless you do have a structured system where you can track your variables, then you're going to struggle to progress. I mean, that you can't track. How do you know if you're progressing in it?
Oh man, I totally agree.
Sure, that's something that you're hot on.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like, even if you strip it back, it's, you know, you're talking about principles, then you're talking about structure, and then you're talking about progress. So if you can apply first, and this is for like training, this is for nutrition. Nutrition's a minefield, right? So we won't dive too deep, but training, nutrition, lifestyle, right? If you kind of took a three-pronged attack on it, it'd be like, okay, what are my principles for each of these sections? Yeah. What is my system or structure? And then how do I progress? And then people usually find that when they have systems and structure, they can then play with that. And then there's this newfound freedom to feeding better, moving better, or, you know, people might have a little bit more specific goals. That's a different thing. But I feel like before you even get specific, you should probably lay down some groundwork, kind of get to know yourself a little better, get to know what you're about, get to know what you like to do, what you don't like to do, and then build from there. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. It does make me laugh. Actually, it was making me think about when we were talking about training, about like, you know, throwing shit at the wall. When I think about like the dumbest things I've done in the gym, because you're like, oh yeah, in my early years I did some dumb stuff. It's like, oh my god. I mean, I definitely have some stories of like some of the dumbest stuff I've done. Yeah. But tell me, like, I want to hear it. Like,
oh man, not only do I have stories of dumbest stuff, I have videos of the deadlift. I was so proud of myself when I was 22 years old, and I lifted 145 kilos off the floor, and I felt like an absolute beast. And I actually videoed it, and I lifted it off the floor so quickly that my back looked straight at the beginning, but then it molded into this hideous shape like midway through. And so I mean, when we talk about stupid stuff, I would say various horrendous deadlifts off the floor, which I've actually got on video as well. Gosh.
Any crazy programs?
Actually, I did German volume training back in the day, but I got really good results with it. But I did jump. Okay, I've got crazy stuff for you. In 2013, I did this fitness model competition called Miami Pro. And I was dieting on 1,500 calories a day at the time. And I was doing German volume training, 110 kilos on my back, no belt, ass to grass. Well, probably not ass to grass, but pretty deep. And yeah, I could have just potentially been a little bit smarter, because I don't think I would do that now. Because basically on the last set, I felt something in my back. Was it like that? Or was it maybe more like this, like like two discs gliding over each other? And basically the next day when I went to go to the toilet, I couldn't sit down on the toilet, and it took me about like 4 or 5 days. So yeah, I mean, when you say, is there any one thing that you've done that's like ridiculously stupid, I would probably just say like training unbelievably recklessly for the first 8 years of my training career. And then that eventually taught me how to be a better coach, to be honest, because it taught me how to manage injuries, how to take my nutrition seriously as well. You know, for example, like when I was younger, going out in the piss before I would have a proper training session. You know, like now I couldn't do that. I couldn't go out and get wrecked and then expect to be on point the next day for a training session. But when you're younger, you just do it, don't you?
You do.
What are you?
Because you can recover from it.
Yeah, you can recover.
But yeah, no. Just thinking about dumb things I did. Again, I mentioned a guy, Dr. Hassan. He was really the guy that got me into, you know, being even interested in sort of like powerlifting, heavyweight training. Before that, I was like typical fighter, you know, just high reps, tons of cardio, loads of plyometrics, and just tons and tons of fighting. And he was really the one that got me going. And I remember the first time he introduced me to sumo deadlifting, and you know, we were going at it. There was a little bit of bravado. Obviously, I didn't want to fuck up. And we started, and this was in a Virgin Active. I remember it was in a Virgin Active. You know, we're going hard in there. And so we're loading it up. I think I get somewhere to like 150 or something. And then we just keep going. We're just practicing reps. I think we go up to max. Then we just drop set it. We do, I don't know how many deadlifts we did that day. And I genuinely learned the lesson of what a deadlift will do to your nervous system. 10 days I was sore, maybe 2 weeks. I just could not walk for like, and I don't know. I won't attest to what he was like, but man, I could not walk for like nearly 2 weeks. Definitely first week I was in so much pain. And then I remember like at this particular gym, like the gym is like 3 floors up, and you'd have to go down and up again to different various areas. It was so painful. It was like the worst thing I ever tried to do. And then the second sort of like, oh, this is kind of dumb, but I'm gonna do it, was I think it was like back in, it might be like 2012. I was at a place called LA Fitness. Do you remember LA Fitness?
Yeah, we trained in one.
Yeah, so this was back in my like, I wanted to try some bodybuilding for a little bit, right? And it didn't really last long at all. But I was training with a guy, and he was a bodybuilder. And he was like, yeah, man, like we got to get good at pull-ups. I'm like, yeah, no, I agree. Like we got to get good at pull-ups. And we had this obsession with getting as good as we could at pull-ups. And the only way we decided that we were going to get good at pull-ups is by doing lots of pull-ups. So we set the task of doing, okay, we have to do, it was something stupid. I actually can't remember the number, but it was something, but minimum, we had to do 250 pull-ups every week for 4 weeks. And that was going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to be able to like bang out loads of pull-ups after this. We're so strong. And yeah, I mean, it was, when you start breaking down, and probably it might have been more, but let's just say it was definitely like no less than 250 a week. Inside the rest of your training program, it sucked. Most of it was just bicep work, spotting each other, just bicep curling each other up. But just to that point though, to be honest, when I deloaded and we didn't do pull-ups for a couple of weeks, we took a week off training. I think I got like 30 something, 31 pull-ups in a row, or 32. I was like, damn, this actually works. But again, it was kind of dumb because I was so sore. I could not, my other training sessions were so crap. But you know what? Those are the kind of things that are kind of, when you think back on like your training history, it's kind of fun. They're like, oh yeah, I did that dumb thing. 100%. Yeah, since then I've probably done a bunch of dumb things, but especially from a diet perspective too. I remember the time I took If It Fits Your Macros way too far. you know, to the point of like absolute, you know, micronutrient, you know, depletion, not even giving a crap about that. It's like, it was like, oh yeah, I wonder if I could. It was just one of those I wonder if I could scenarios, right? Like, oh, you wonder if you could live off of, I don't know. Do you remember muscle mousse? I don't even know if they even do it anymore, but I remember the year.
So muscle mousse is like I never had it, but it's presumably it's like a mousse. It's like a protein shake in a mousse form.
Yeah, so basically it's like it comes in a bag, it looks like protein powder, and then you make it up and it turns into like a mousse. And I remember I was at Body Power Expo one year when it first came out. I'm like, oh my God, I got so obsessed with it. And it was just funny, just for a while, just getting so like into that. And then, oh my, like a bunch of stuff. Anyway, coming full circle to today, when you're a little bit more grown up, a little bit more mature, it helps just to have some principles, but you wouldn't learn your principles unless you do a bunch of dumb stuff first. So
Sure.
to your point, you know, you learn from your mistakes.
Oh yeah. You do learn from your mistakes, man. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the mistakes, but yeah, that's a funny story, man. The eating one. So what? So you smash loads and loads of muscle mousse on if it fits your macros.
I think it was the one that I actually remember. It was like try and get every 0-calorie type sauce going, get every kind of like low calorie protein, high protein. Oh my God, I was like on the toilet all the time. It was like terrible. It was like, but if it fits your macros, it's like, you know, yeah, it's just taking things too far, right? So
yeah, I remember when I first discovered protein shakes, I was about 19 years old, no, maybe 20 years old, and I decided I was going to try and get a six-pack in 2 weeks because, of course, that's achievable. And my natural body composition, I'm not like super lean naturally, so I decided in the last week running up to it that I was going to live off just protein shakes. So I literally had just whey protein for a week, and I went to the loo, and I don't know if have you ever consumed too much protein and nothing else?
Yeah, I've done it once or twice.
You know what it does? It was like, oh my gosh, it was like I needed to go to the loo, but it was as if there was concrete inside and nothing was coming out.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, it's even worse. Like back in the day when I'm trying to think of like all the old school like protein shake, like those ones where you mix it and you throw like a scoop of powder and it just like turn into a massive ball and it just wouldn't even like dissolve or mix. It was like the worst. But yeah, that's like way back. I'm probably like showing my age a little bit, but
you're the same as me, 32. That's what I am.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, yeah. So we're young. But yeah, man. Like, but talking about nutrition, what are you doing? What are you doing right now? Like in terms of like,
yes,
we've been in lockdown. We're 3 lockdowns in. I mean, where are you at with like your nutrition? What do you? Is there anything you kind of adhere to, or are you just going like all guns blazing? You know, what's up with that?
All guns blazing. What do you mean? Like, as in all in 100%, or?
Yeah, I mean, like you dialing it in, or you just deliver every night.
I'm on the bulk, man. So I'm about 94 kilos right now, and actually my training's going really well at the minute. But I'm learning so much that nutrition is. I know it's the old classic, isn't it? And I know we've probably been saying it to our clients forever, but nutrition is so important. Like whether you're cutting or bulking, or even just maintaining. But the thing is, me right now, I'm on that slow bulk. So it's almost like maintaining, but just a little bit more. So what I'm learning now is actually the amount of calories you get in is super important if you want to make gains. If you want to actually provide the resources to build new tissue. So I'm hitting about 2,700 calories at the moment, which is the highest my calories have ever been without me feeling like a fat mess, which is good. And yeah, just to be honest, the 2 main variables that I track, and this is what I track with clients as well, is protein target and calories. Because those 2 variables, like you said, you know, when you're doing the crazy if it fits your macros days, you know, where you literally bend the rules of, you know, can I eat only processed food and lose weight? Well, yeah, you technically can, but so yeah, the two variables that I track regarding nutrition are calories and protein. I only recently started tracking actually, because I wasn't tracking up until a few weeks ago, but I started again recently just to just because I decided, you know what, right? I've got this time in lockdown. I've got my weights equipment at home, and I want to make the most of this time. So let's actually focus on each variable as well as I can. And I was concerned that I wasn't hitting my protein target, but actually I'm far and away exceeding it. So the standard 1 gram per pound of protein, but to be honest, I normally end up like around 220, 240 grams a day. And then as far as micronutrients and stuff are concerned, I just make sure that my diet's clean, man. So I sound like such a bodybuilder, don't I? Clean, bro. Clean. So what I mean by that, though, what I mean by that is, like talking real talk, is basically as long as I'm getting a good amount of vegetables each day. And here's the other thing as well. Do you know what? Honestly, this does sound a bit wishy-washy. I don't know if you can relate to this, but when I was younger, I used to binge eat even. When I first started training, I would binge eat. Like I would train, I was not used to my blood sugar level dropping, and my brain signal would go to the shop and buy cookies. So I developed a weird training / binge eating thing for I don't know, maybe the first 6 months to a year of training where I wasn't able to control my food cravings. I didn't know about pre-workout nutrition or post-workout nutrition. Now, my relationship with food is such that, because I've done various competitions, I've dieted to like an extremely lean state. Basically, like dieting when you're getting extremely lean, it's a controlled starvation to an extent, and it's an amazing journey because it's kind of like a spiritual quest in a sense, because you're learning to not ignore certain signals from your brain that say go eat food, go eat food, go eat food, but to acknowledge them, but carry on with your goal regardless, which means you don't go and eat that food. You have a portion of food that's going to get you to your goal, which is probably not as much as what you would want to eat. Anyway, the point is, having done those long dieting process, like in 2018, I dieted for 8 months. And when I finished that diet, yeah, I did quite a lot of binge eating. I went mental, right, a few times. And it was actually a weird blessing in disguise, because one time when I binge eated, I went to my brother's house, and he had like a box of Thornton's chocolates there, and I ate like the whole box, and as well as other stuff as well. We'd been out the night before. I felt so disgusting on the way home. I literally felt like someone had poured toxins into your body.
Okay, it's not in a good way.
No, not in a good way. Like my experience of consciousness was seriously not good, right? As in, I couldn't enjoy the present moment because I felt so horrible, because I had so much crap in my body. And bear in mind, when I've been dieting, there comes to a point with if it's a macro stuff that you almost need to eat healthy at the end when your calories get low enough, because that's the only way that you're actually going to have semi-filling meals. Otherwise, you're just going to be going mad all the time. And if you want to eat stuff, you almost like need to eat some slower digesting carbs, because when on that low amount of calories, it won't last you that long, the energy. Do you know what I mean? So it almost forces you to eat properly. So like the long dieting phase works for that, to actually teach you proper eating habits of behavior. But the other thing as well is, now having done it for so long, like the bodybuilding lifestyle and stuff, and experienced how horrendous I feel whenever I binge eat, I honestly don't feel good when I eat like chocolate and stuff like that. And I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't eat those kind of foods, but me now, so when I say eat clean, I just have a relationship with my body where like there are certain foods that I don't feel good to eat. Like I'm not trying to like shame anyone that does like to eat those foods or nothing like that, but like there are certain like heavily processed, high calorific foods that I don't enjoy eating, if you know what I mean. That's where I am right now. Talk to me in a few months, maybe I'll change my mind. But so yeah. So in terms of my personal current nutrition is making sure I hit my daily calories and hitting my protein target. And then the old pull check rule as well is good. Don't know if you remember that. Pull check was a fitness coach, well, still is. But if it doesn't,
I'm more of a polypin man.
Oh yeah. You like your yeah, I'm not going to say it. No, Poliquin. I like Poliquin as well. I was a big fan of Poliquin too. I loved him. Rest in peace, Poliquin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolute top strength coach. But if it doesn't swim, grow, fly, walk, run, don't eat it. And I'm not. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that. Sorry. I'm not necessarily saying that's true. I think the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule, you know, everything in moderation, including moderation. Sometimes moderation means throwing moderation out the window. I'm a big believer in that as well. Like, cut loose once in a while. That's really, really important. But for the most part, in order for me to sustain my feel goodness, eating what I would call real food, i.e. non-processed food, works best for me.
Yeah. I mean, some of it we wish we could say was common sense. It should be common sense sometimes, but it's not. And, you know, we all struggle with areas of this. Yeah, and, you know, I'm someone that massively struggles with sort of that type of those types of foods. Like I'm one of those people who just can't have stuff like that in the house or around me. So like it's more of like and this is like this for like, you know, my lifestyle, my health, my nutrition, training. It's just that self-awareness over the years where you learn what is right. You kind of learn what your demons are, and these are things that you're always going to struggle with. This is the thing. Like, there's no like absolutes. You can't speak in absolutes. You're not going to go from like, okay, I used to like mess around with some donuts. I don't eat a single, you know, eventually you'll have to face demons, whether it's within your training, whether it's in your lifestyle, the way, you know, how, you know, if you're talking about in lifestyle, like with productivity, I'm a massive procrastinator and an overthinker. And so that's a demon. I managed to do, like, last year I had a great year, but the thing is, I always have those demons, like the procrastination. And then from a nutrition standpoint, like I can't have that kind of stuff in the house, because it's like if there's cereal, the whole box is getting eaten. If there's a donut, all of it's going to get. So it's better just not to have it in there. And if I genuinely want it, and this is another principle for me with eating, if I genuinely want it, I'm going, right, if I want a donut, I'm going to go get the best donut I can freaking find that's the best donut ever made, and then I'm going to enjoy it. And it's like I like whiskey. I'm not going to drink some like cheap ass whiskey. Like which is like not even often, but let's say, for example, I want some whiskey. Hey man, I tell you what, I'm going to go get whatever is the best version of that, and I'm going to sit there, I'm going to enjoy it, I'm going to savor it, and I'm going to move on from it. And that's kind of my principle when it comes to that, because the rest of the time it's very much like I'm going back to Stan Efferdin. You can kind of tell who sort of inspires me. But the whole vertical diet is, I'm not going to get into it, but if people want to kind of look it up. But I'm definitely a big advocate of almost like the vertical diet, or that kind of style of eating. Keeping things very simple, keeping things, again, very consistent, making sure that, you know, proteins are protein and micronutrients are there, or I get enough of those. And then the fluff, I like to call it, is kind of sprinkled in here and there. And then my big rule with, like, I don't like to call anything naughty foods or stuff like that, but like, let's just say that kind of stuff. It's just that if I'm going to do it, it's one, I've earned them. So like, earn your carbs, earn your treats, through sort of like physical activity, steps, things like that. And then two, it's like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Like, I ain't going to get some vegan, or I'm not against vegans, actually. I should have started with that. But like gluten-free, dairy-free, blah, 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 free, like not even what it's supposed to be. You might as well just not eat it kind of dessert, right? Like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Or whatever treat it is, I'm going to do it. And then I'm just going to move on from it. And that kind of awareness, to knowing that that's what works for me, has really, really helped. You know, a couple of things, making sure I get enough protein in, watch my calories, earn my treats. Like, and when I do treat myself, it's going to be damn good. And that's, yeah.
No, yeah, that's yeah, this is an interesting topic, man. Okay, I got one more for you.
Yeah.
Regarding food, this has been a big thing for me this year. I'm not really sure how to bring this into market this into my actual business as an offering in any way, but this has been a massive game changer for me when it comes to like managing my food and all that kind of stuff. Which is, when it at the start of this year, I realized there were so many activities in my life that I did mindlessly. For example, whenever I go to the loo, I'd look at my phone, right? whenever I would eat, I would always have something on YouTube. And And then I realized, man, I'm always distracting myself from this present moment. So here's a real random thing. Maybe you should try this out, right? I don't know if you resonate to that, but since then, I set myself the goal. This is like my work for this year. This is like my spiritual work, or whatever you want to call it, is when I eat, is to eat mindfully, basically. So what I mean is be present with my meal. And it's hard, it's a challenge to do sometimes, because it's like a meditation, basically. Even though historically eating would be one of the most intense experiences of our day, you know, unless, I think I said it on the last podcast, even if we had sex, you know, unless we had sex that day, or we like hunted and killed an animal, like eating would probably be the most sensually rewarding thing we did that day. Yet in our modern day life, we distract ourselves from it. And what I found is that eating a healthy meal, eating a meal with like proper stuff in it, you know, proteins, vegetables, etc., is gives me way more mouth pleasure than eating quote unquote processed treat food, let's say. So I find that very, very interesting. I don't know what to make of that. I haven't got like a resounding point there. Try mindful eating, but I think that's very interesting. I've just become a lot more aware that food is not pleasurable to me, so I don't eat it. But to cap off, I'm lucky at this present moment in time, because I like I said, when I binged so badly in the past, honestly, that food creates a reaction in me that is like to feel a bit sick. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand.
So I'm quite lucky for that. And by the way, I wanted to say, I think that's a really good point what you made, which is, you know what, like people, across Instagram and all that, like people talk about not banning foods and all this kind of thing, and having a balanced approach to eating and not demonizing food groups. I think it's extremely important to recognize when certain foods are triggering. As in, like, genuinely, if, like what you're saying, like if you keep certain food in the house and then that can spur you on to overeating, which means you gain weight, which does not support your goals, or, you know, gain unwanted body fat, or improve your quality of life, because your self-esteem is your reputation with yourself. So if you're constantly creating situations for yourself where you can't control your eating, it could potentially, it's not going to improve your happiness, maybe. So I think it's extremely important. On the flip side of the coin, it is very important to sometimes eliminate the possibility of you eating certain foods, at least for a period of time, where you're better equipped to handle those demons, as you would say.
Yeah, it's self-awareness, I believe.
Yes.
And again, you know, and gain I think the trick is like how you gain that self-awareness first. It makes it a lot easier. And you know, there's a couple of things you kind of mentioned the last kind of 10 minutes or so that I find interesting. Number one is the journey with sort of like dieting, extreme dieting, kind of getting down to extreme low body fat. I believe there's not enough conversation about what happens after that point. Even like in our industry, I'm all for transformations. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love a transformation. I love watching these people do what they do, and I get there is a process to get down to that. You've got to do some you got to go there, right? It's not going to be easy. It gets a little hard at points.
Go there.
However, I just feel like there should be more out there about like the aftercare. What is the aftercare? Like, great, this person's got a transformation. Now show me what they look like in 1 year.
Yeah.
Show me what their habits look like. Show me what they look like in 5 years. Or not even show me, like they could explain how they feel. How do they move? What has got better? So like, again, I feel like it's great, like doing almost like a transformation, like diet type thing, but it'd be great to see a little bit more conversation about aftercare around it. Like, what does it really take? Because they're going, okay, you know, get in shape 12 weeks. Great. No, you're talking more like, and let's say someone's a bit more pragmatic. Let's say 16, 20 weeks of dieting, blah, blah, blah. Well, now you're talking more like, I don't know, 24 to 40 weeks, because you want to be talking about the reverse diet, right? What comes after the aftercare? How do you manage what you've just done? Yeah. So I actually found what you said there really, really interesting. And I feel like that whole journey could also play into the whole self-awareness when it comes to mindful eating. And to be honest, I'm a big proponent of. Actually, now today, when I talk a little bit more about nutrition, I believe there are set processes to this, like, for example, most people, like, when they're going on, like, for example, a fat loss journey, they need to be in some sort of, caloric deficit. Now, there is almost like a set system with that. And we can use tools today in order to kind of go through that process very easily. Now, we all know now as coaches, the process is not the issue. The issue is consistency and adherence to the process in that particular process and the aftercare. So I actually now, and I mean, this is just an added point because you just reminded me, is with the nutrition coaching, I mean, I use tools. Let's say, for example, if you heard of Carbon Diet Coach. So that's from a guy called Lane Norton. Great guy. I really love his work, Dr. Lane Norton. And for example, with my clients, it has a built-in algorithm, for example, right? And it will adjust calories based on compliance for the diet for the week. And so we take that kind of thinking out of the equation. And what I provide as, let's say, a nutrition coach, instead of just like the X's and the O's, do this, don't do that, I try to take a principle-based approach to nutrition. So the coaching part, the nutrition coaching part, has got more to do with how intuitive you are, how do you deal with these sort of barriers during the week when you're trying to be compliant. And I kind of dive in a bit more deeper on that side of things, kind of be more mindful, being present with your meals, like those types of habits with food, eating, nutrition, than I do with the X's and O's, because the X's and O's are not relatively simple, but if we were all to have a big discussion, in its most logical sense, it is, but what gets difficult when it comes to, let's say, dieting down, let's say just getting into better shape, let's say managing food, managing calories, is really the behavior behind it. And so I feel like there could also in the future be just a bit more of a bigger discussion about awareness, about, how to coach behavior. Even though we're starting to have that point, we're still a little bit stuck. And I get it. It's because we're trying to sell services, we're trying to sell the result. And nobody wants to be like, oh, look at his 5-year transformation. Like, they want to see 12 weeks. They want to see 6 weeks. They want to see 2 days. They want to see 1 week abs. Yeah. People don't want to go, okay, like, yeah, like here's a 12-week result. Now here's a 40-week result. And like, that's a bigger win than that 12 weeks. And so I'm a little bit, again, I'm a bit opinionated on the matter. I'm not saying I'm right. I just find that, like, if we're talking about, and again, this comes down to user experience. If we're talking about the everyday person, someone with a job, works long hours, might have a family, might have other responsibilities, juggling other motivations, passions in life, blah, blah, blah. And it isn't their sole focus. And showing their abs isn't their sole focus, or just being absolutely shredded isn't their sole focus. Then we need to come up with a system based on principles that has progression, that allows us to move forward when it comes to nutrition. And the same thing for training, and the same thing for our lifestyle. And that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, in a way, you can't blame people for wanting a transformation because that's what they've been sold.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just great if we were, because absolutely do what you say on the tin. However, I mean, if I'm going to go buy a car, right, I want to know what it exactly does. I want to know exactly what I'm getting. However, I would like to know how long is it likely to last? Is it sustainable? What is the running cost of this thing? Like, I'm not just going to buy, right, nice fancy car, I'm going to go grab it. I agree. People should be, they should be, for example, if you're going to pay for a result, go get a result. I just think sometimes as maybe like a moral obligation, or maybe just a personal principle, perhaps there should be a wider discussion telling them exactly what they're getting in for. Because I'll be honest, like a lot of my business over the last year has been kind of based around this. A lot of people having those really quick, hard, fast results, being sold on the the transformation, and they're like, well, I finished. What do I do? I'm on 1,500 calories a day. I feel like shit. I'm stressed. I'm providing more external stress from family, from job. I don't know how to manage everything. All of a sudden, they're 10, 15 kilos heavier 24 weeks later. I'm not saying that's in every case, but I think if we took a big sort of like, we took a meta-analysis of like, not that you could, but if you could, and you took all these results and you took a picture, or you asked them how they were in 12, 24, 40 weeks, I would just be intrigued to see where they would be at, like how much of that result they kept, what kind of behaviors, positive and negative, did they kind of acquire. It would just be such an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, I think people want to change the way they look to change the way they feel. So ultimately, we're not talking about changing the way we look here. We're talking about changing the way we feel. And same for your clients, right? We're not talking about their performance. Ultimately, we're talking about the way they feel. And if we can make them feel better, if we can give them the tools in their life to manage this variable of their life so they feel better, that is the most important thing. And I feel what the fitness industry does, it does sell, as you say, a transformation. But from my experience in bodybuilding, and I got into this because of insecurity, wanted to look good naked and with clothes on, but you can't do both at the same time, because when you're ripped, you look skinny, and when you look good in clothes, you chubby. But here's the thing: I think what really needs to be sold more is that so one, bodybuilding is a lifestyle. Yeah, we've all heard that. But actually, what it ultimately teaches you is how to accept your body in all phases. Because it's cool when you're dieting and you're lean, but you also have to learn to love yourself when you're bulking and adding muscle, or maintaining when you're not as lean. And I feel that's just an important part of the process. And with my clients, for example, I always sell it to them as, okay, we're going to diet you down for a photo shoot. Bear in mind, you could hypothetically, if you wanted to, look like this all the time, but for your own health and sanity, it's a temporary result. Because hormonally, right, if you value your sex drive, being extremely lean is probably not best to maintain that look, unless you're one of the genetically blessed few that can easily maintain extremely lean body composition. So that being said, you actually allow them to appreciate the reverse, which is understanding that gaining some body fat is going to provide better leverages for your lifts, which means you can lift heavier weight, which means you can build more muscle. When you're dieting on 1,800 calories, it might not be the funnest thing in the world to eat that little, but it's really, really cool and thrilling to see yourself getting leaner every day and see all that definition coming through. But the reverse is true as well. Being able to eat more food than you have for the last 3-4 months is incredible. So I think what we need to do is sell our clients on the benefits of both, really. For example, I'm working with one guy now, and he's doing like a photo shoot, cutting. Now the thing is, interesting thing, his goals, like trying to lose a bit of weight, was not, it just wasn't exciting enough. So we've got him to book in a photo shoot. The whole thing's changed. Like his approach to it, he's a lot more focused, a lot more disciplined. Now, obviously, coming out of that, here's the other thing as well. When you get that razor-like focus where you're dieting for, let's say you're doing a transformation, it's a great period of time to learn and integrate habits. But this comes around to the terminology of food, and how we diet someone is extremely important. Okay, for example, when I was younger, I used to have a cheat meal. Now, when I was dieting, so I got the first ever 2-3 times I got really lean, I'd have a cheat meal, right? So the only 2 experiences of eating that I had for months were cheating and starving, and nothing in between. Whereas you can actually teach people a lot about the reverse dieting process, or rebound diet, or whatever you want to call it, by allowing them to practice refeeding. So allowing them to have that abundance in their diet once or twice a week, where they increase their calories, but they don't go crazy. And if you install those behaviors, then that can make the post-dieting process a lot easier. So to summarize, I think we have to train our clients in the dieting process to prepare for the period of time afterwards, and then understand what it truly is, which I've always seen it as. It's an event. Like if you want to do a transformation, that is an event. You're experiencing dieting yourself down to a really, really lean state, and it's a really fun thing to do that's going to teach you a lot about your body. That's an event within your fitness journey. And once that event's finished, you should know what you want to do, whether that's maintain, so gain some body fat, or go into like a bulking, strength gaining phase, whatever you want to call it. And you understand that this thing is in cycles. Cyclic, is that a bit of a word? Like it's in cycles, and your job is to actually practice acceptance of your body through all the different stages, learn that they're all okay. That's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. I think if more people can kind of think about it that way. I mean, again, for me, the conversations I tend to have is about just having a buffer, right? Like, understand what's kind of a peak moment for you, understand what's a happy place, and understand when, you know, it's time to, you know, metaphorically tighten the belt. You know, and then so I feel like if we're talking about, if the discussion is about having a long-term result, a sustainable result, then we do need, like you said, you know, loving your body in all forms is a very good one. And I think understanding what is the buffer for you, because, you know, there's periods of time I'm much leaner. There's periods of time where, you know, I'm a little puffy.
Yeah.
But man, I'm strong. So I can love that bit. But the point is somewhere in between that is actually the happy spot. And if you have that little buffer and you have wiggle room, because the problem is when we're trying to retain this like specific thing, specific look, specific weight, you know, it's almost arbitrary because there's too much fluctuation to really pinpoint, oh, I'm here, I'm at blah, blah, blah. It's like, you're not. So as long as you've got some kind of buffer to play with, the wow, man, like I've peaked, I've dialed in.
Exactly.
And okay, the metaphorical tightening of the belt, if you're in that realm, that happy spot realm, you can figure out where that is. Again, I'm just bringing it around to like everyday use, everyday person, because most of the time when I'm not competing, I'm just the everyday person. Like, okay, I'm a fitness enthusiast, but like but you know, I'm a father, I have a family at home, you know, I have a stressful job. No, it's not that stressful. But you know, you have responsibility. So like, I try to think, if I'm going to give someone a solution, I need to think, you know, would it be a solution for me? You know, I get up at 5 a.m. You know, sometimes I'm not done with work till very, very late on 9 p.m. You know, sometimes I do go without sleep. Sometimes your kids wake you up in the middle of the night. And you're like, oh man. And then it becomes what is acceptable with everything, really. Like, what is your buffer? Like training, for example, minimum training requirement, minimum effective dose. What is that for you? What's maximum peak for you? Okay, cool. Now let's play around within that. And then within the longer span of time, there are going to be times where you lean towards one end of the pendulum to the other. Now, the sustainable result really is within those two points. It's the same for training. It's the same for nutrition. And I believe it's the same for like lifestyle as well, like stress management. Everyone's always just talking about how to be less stressed. It's like, there's only varying degrees, you know, and we're not, you know, we would all love to reach enlightenment. But, you know, it doesn't always work that way. So I think it's always good to just have good self-awareness and know what the buffer is for everything. And just, and then kind of like hang around and hover around there, you know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, always base everything off the minimum effective dose. And when motivation comes, take advantage of it. But allow that minimum effective dose to guide you through. Because let's face facts, for me personally, okay, right now I'm super enthusiastic about training. I'd probably say about half the year, I'm not. Like, I turn up to 50% of my workouts feeling like I can't be asked. That's the truth. Yeah. And, you know, you do it based on commitment, not because you love it.
Yeah, sometimes you just have a routine. Sometimes you have a minimum requirement for yourself. And to be honest, most people, you'll find that in one area of their life or another, they are able to exercise that type of behavior. And if they can take that kind of behavior and start to associate it with elements of their life that are going to be a benefit to them physically, mentally, spiritually, you know, maybe like handling their food and their diet, then I feel like they'd have a much better time. And to your point, like beginning of the year, man, like I trained, for example, last year, I legit trained for 9 months every day. Did not miss a training. I loved it. The sun was out. I was like flipping my tire down the driveway. I, like loved it. Winter hit me. I got a little lazy with, maybe a little bit like lazy with work, a bit more tired. Got to that Christmas period. I felt tired, right? And so New Year, typically I'm like, right, ready to go, ready to train, ready to compete, ready to do. Didn't happen. And I feel like, I mean, maybe it's just because of the situation we're all currently in the UK, but for me, like I actually hit almost like not a bout of depression, but like definitely it was a lot of negative vibe. It was a lot of trying to figure out, oh man, like what is the goal this year? Like, why the hell am I doing this? Why do I have to take care of myself? Like, and to find the motivation to start training. And to be honest, that lasted quite a few weeks. Like, for a good couple weeks, 3 weeks, I was like, this was not like me, right? I'm going from training every day down to like maybe once, twice, could not be asked. The only thing there was a couple of things that pulled me out of that kind of funk, and we all get them a lot of the time. Number one was just having like my base routine. Like routine is king. If I could just fall back on autopilot and do the things that have always served me well, without kind of assigning any amount of positive or negative energy to the action, just being very stoic, then I felt like that kind of pulled me out my funk. And then my second step is just kind of remember your why. And a lot of people have a why. Sometimes my why to be in the best version